Hello, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing the Christmas Traditions book tag. I just saw Sarah at Brighton Bookish do this tag a little while ago, and I thought it was really fun and really festive, and I was really in the mood for some sort of Christmassy tag, and I thought the questions in this one were different than some of the other tags that I saw, so I'm excited to dive in and do them. This tag was originally created by Reading with a Vengeance, and I will link their channel and also Sarah's down below so that way you can go check them out. Question number 1, Red, Gold, and Cream, a book with any combination of those colors on the cover. So I had a really hard time with this, finding books that actually had all three, and I ended up going with a book that is probably kind of cheating. I'm going with this lovely edition of Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I don't think you can really call that cream, but it does have a lot of red and a lot of gold, and I absolutely love this edition. Question number 2 is caroling. What is your favorite Christmas carol? Pick a book with a title that includes a word from the title of the Christmas carol. So I think my favorite Christmas carol, at least at the moment, is Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. And I couldn't really think of a book that had any of those words in the title, but I did think of The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. So it does have long in the title, even though that's technically 4 books and not 1. I'm working my way through The Long Price Quartet. I have read 3 of the 4 books so far and have really enjoyed them. You've probably heard me talk about them, but if you have not heard of The Long Price Quartet, it's a very slow, interesting, and political fantasy series. There's a lot of Asian inspiration there, and the magic system is very, very unique. So it's very different from anything that I've ever read, and that's something that has really made me like it that much more. Question number 3 is Christmas Trees, Wreaths, and Evergreen Foliage, a book that features nature as a character. So for that book, I'm going with The Yearling by Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. I read this book a couple of years ago, and oh my word, it's really stuck with me. It is such a beautifully written book. If you haven't read it, it's about a young boy named Jody who is growing up in Florida, and at some point in the book, actually it's kind of a little ways into the book, he ends up discovering this little yearling deer and raising it. But the nature descriptions of Florida are just absolutely gorgeous, so immersive. Some of the most beautiful nature writing that I have read. So I highly recommend this one. Question number 4 is Holiday Cards, a favorite epistolary book you read this year or want to read next year. So I actually really do not enjoy epistolary novels at all. It's one thing if there are some letters interspersed, but most epistolary novels I have read, I have either very much disliked or ended up DNFing, unfortunately. And that includes books like 84 Charing Cross Road and the Guernsey Literary Potato Pie Society, something, whatever that book is. I DNF'd that one very shortly into it, and I finished 84 Charing Cross Road, but I didn't like it. I know that's really unpopular opinion because those are like books for book lovers, but I really just don't enjoy the epistolary format. So last year I did read a book that was in epistolary format, and I actually really, really liked it, and I was so surprised, and that's Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. This story is about a young girl who is an orphan, and she is now able to go to college suddenly because she has a sponsor. She has someone who has decided to send her to college and pay for everything, but his only requirement is that she write him, I can't remember if it's 1 letter a school year or 1 letter a month or something like that. And so this entire book is her letters to her sponsor, who she affectionately refers to as the Daddy Longlegs. And it's just a really sweet story. I really enjoyed it. I laughed out loud reading this. I just thought that she was really, really funny. Question number 5 is Mistletoe, a book that features unrequited love. And the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is love triangles and YA books, but I really don't read a ton of YA books, partly because I don't love love triangles or insta-love or a lot of the tropes that tend to be present in quite a few YA books. So the book that I am going with is Memoirs of a Geisha. Funny that I would choose this book because I actually did not love this book. I loved the writing of it, I loved the metaphors in it, but there was a lot of elements to the ending in particular that I really did not enjoy. I had some very strong opinions on that was unfortunately quite different than the opinions of the group of people that I read it with. But anyways, it's about this young girl who ends up becoming a geisha in Japan, and there is a situation of unrequited love there. I'm not going to talk anymore about it just because I don't want to spoil it. Question number 6 is Santa Claus, a book that features a character who's not likable but is endearing anyway. I don't know, it's gonna depend on who you talk to as to whether or not you would call this person endearing. I don't know that that is the right word, but we're going with Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment, because I feel like there's so many things about him that are really unlikable, and yet I find myself rooting for him like the whole time. If you don't know anything about Crime and Punishment, it is a classic Russian literature book, which probably most people know, but many people may not actually know the plot of it. It is about a young man, Raskolnikov, who decides that he is going to kill this pawnbroker and take her money, basically. And so we know that he is planning this, and then he executes the murder not that far into the book. And so it's almost like a murder mystery kind of a deal in a way, but rather than trying to figure out who committed the murder, we're trying to figure out why. You're very much in his head, and he's like wrestling and grappling with his own human nature, with his desires, with the different philosophical things, what he feels like he should be feeling based on what society thinks or what people have said to him, contrasted with what he's actually feeling. And so there's a lot in this book, a lot to unpack. But I really liked Raskolnikov to an extent. I mean, there were times where I didn't like him because he's not that likable, but yet I was rooting for him. So that's what we're going with. Question number 7 is A Nativity Scene, a family-based historical fiction. So this is not really an epic family historical fiction, but I'm gonna go with The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. I just read this last month and absolutely loved it, and really feel like the family element in it is really strong. It's about 4 Chinese women who immigrate to the United States, and then they all become friends, and they all have daughters. And so there's different sections of the book where we follow the mothers, and then we follow the daughters, and then we go back to the mothers again. And so it's very interesting in its examination of immigration, of Chinese culture, and how each one of their daughters was born in America. So there's this cultural divide. Despite the fact that they were raised by Chinese parents, there is this divide between these Chinese mothers and then their Chinese American children. And so I found that really, really interesting. It does delve into some World War II history, especially, what was happening in China with Imperial Japan. But it's not really only that. I think it is much more relational than it is historical, especially in comparison to Amy Tan's other book that I've read, The Kitchen God's Wife. I felt like the historical aspect in that book was much more strong, but I feel like the cultural and character elements and relational elements in this book were stronger than The Kitchen God's Wife. So, highly recommend this one. Loved it a lot. It's not really an epic saga, although I guess you do get 2 generations technically, but I'm still counting it. Question number 8 is Elf on a Shelf, a book on your shelf that catches your eye all the time, but you never pick up. I have owned this book for almost a year. A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. I want to read this so bad, but I just feel like there's always other things that are happening and other books that are right there, or buddy reads that I have going on, or other series that I'm right in the middle of, and do I really need to start another series? All of those elements. But every time I look at my shelf, and it's the shelf that's right next to my bed, I put my glasses when I go to sleep, like almost right in front of this book, and I see it almost every single day. And every time I'm like, dang, I really want to read that book. Question number 9 is Christmas movies. Favorite adaptation or a book you'd like to see adapted? So I think I'm gonna go with The Moonstone. This is a BBC adaptation of the Wilkie Collins detective mystery story, and it is so well done. I really enjoyed it. I actually watched it with my husband last year, and he really loved it. We were both super invested in it. And I just feel like it is the most well done adaptation I have seen in recent days. As for a book I'd like to see adapted, none. I am a literary purist and I have a really difficult time with adaptations. I will nitpick them to death, being like, why did they change that? Why couldn't they have left that the same? I don't understand. And I do not give grace for creative license like I should. I think part of the reason why I enjoyed The Moonstone is it had been several years since I had read The Moonstone in between when I watched the adaptation. I cannot read a book and then watch the adaptation because I will just nitpick it to death and drive whoever I'm watching it with absolutely bonkers. Question number 10 is Ugly Sweater, a book that made you laugh out loud. So I'm gonna go with a book that I just recently finished with my daughter, and a lot of times I do not share the books that we are reading together on the channel. I don't know why, but I don't really include them in wrap-ups, probably because they're not really on my TBRs, and I usually take longer than a month to read them because it's usually for school in some ways. So that's gonna be The One and Only Ivan. I am sure that everyone had read this book before me, and we had actually started it, my daughter and I, a few years ago, but it is very emotionally intense at times, and we got, I think, maybe a quarter or a third of the way through, and there's a very sad event that takes place, and it was just too much for her sweet little heart to handle. I think she was only 6 at the time, and it was just too much. So she's 10 now, and we absolutely loved this book. It is about a gorilla who lives at a circus that is part of a strip mall. And so it's not really a circus, and the animals are not well taken care of. And the whole book is narrated from Ivan's point of view, and he just has a very distinctive voice, which I think is what really made this book so special, and it's also what made it so funny. Question number 11, Eggnog, a book that you love that everyone seems to hate, or vice versa. So first of all, down in the comments, let me know, are you an eggnog fan or not? Because I feel like that can be quite a divisive topic. My husband loves eggnog and has to drink it on Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. Like, he loves eggnog. I hate eggnog, and even the smell of it makes me want to gag. I just, no, it's too thick, and I just don't like it at all. So anyways, I think that I can't really think of a book that I love that everyone seems to hate, but I can think of a couple books that seemed like they were super popular and I really did not enjoy them. Hate is a really, really strong word though. There are very, very few books that I would say I hated this book. The one that I can think of that I read last year that I super hated, I don't think was super popular. I don't hear people ever talking about, but there's another book that I DNF'd. Can't remember if it was last year or the year before. And it is really well loved on BookTube. And that's The Haunting of Bonaventure Circus by Jamie Jo Wright. I couldn't get through it. I'm sorry guys, I just couldn't. I actually tried reading multiple Jamie Jo Wright books. I enjoyed The Curse of Misty Wayfair, which I read first by her, but there are elements to the writing that I was just like, oh, I don't really like these descriptions or ways that she was writing things, but the story was interesting enough that it was fine. Then I read another book by her, and I can't even remember what it was called. Put it up here if I can figure it out. I hated the end to that book, and it had the same weird descriptions that the first book had. Like, for example, every single man in Jamie Jo Wright's books has corded forearms. Every single one. And the female main character always sees it and is like trying not to think in her mind how hot she thinks he is. Happens in every single one of her books that I've tried. The Haunting of Bonaventure Circus is no different, but there were some descriptions in that book that I couldn't get past them. I just couldn't. She describes this little boy She describes his eyes as questioning Tootsie Rolls of softness. And I was like, what? And then it talks about someone literally the next page over, some woman who was drying her hand, like I'm assuming like this, and talked about how she dried her hand on her ample, naturally made shelf. And I don't know, I'm sorry. I think everyone loves this book. I've never heard anyone say that they don't, or never heard anyone criticize Jamie Jo Wright's writing. I feel like every one of her books that I've read, even 50 pages into The Haunting at Bonaventure Circus, I already knew who everyone was going to end up with because she neatly pairs every single female protagonist. And so the romance element is super formulaic for me, and I have an issue with formulaic romances in general. So yeah, I just couldn't get past the writing. It just wasn't for me. But everyone loves it, and everyone else I've heard who has read Jamie Jo Wright loves her so much. And unfortunately, I just don't. I'm sorry. Question number 12 is exchanging gifts. A book you read this year that you thought, this would be perfect for. And for that one, I'm gonna have to go with The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. I loved this book. This is a YA fantasy, and it delves really heavily into Korean mythology and folklore, which is so fun. I love everything Korean, and at the time that I was reading this book, was studying Korea in school with my daughter and reading like traditional Korean folk tales that children in Korea are really familiar with, and some of them make an appearance in this book, which made that even more fun. And when I read this book, I thought to myself, Christy from Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space would love this book. She loves Korea just as much as I do. In fact, she's the one who introduced me to K-pop, K-dramas, all the Korean things. And she, I would say, probably loves Korea more than I do. And I keep telling her she needs to read it, and she hasn't yet. I think she's gonna think it's really fun. Well, that's it for the Christmas Traditions book tag. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. How would you have answered some of these questions? What is a book that you hate that everyone else loves? That way I'm not the only one with confessions that someone's gonna come after me with, because that's how I feel every time I voice an unpopular opinion. I never want people to feel like I'm insulting their reading choices, because I'm not. Different books and different writing styles for different people is totally fine. So I just feel bad when I voice unpopular opinions. So voice your unpopular opinion in the comments below, please, so I won't be alone. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.